Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai, a space where we'll talk about anything and everything surrounding the people that grind through your month-end accounting close.
Hi, everyone. Today's episode is Navigating Technical Guidance in Accounting. Our guest today is Angela Liu, founder of GaapSavvy. On this episode, we talk about the nature of technical accounting, bridging the gap between technical and operational accounting, and some tips for how to get started in this field. Now, I'll hand it over to our host, GaapSavvy CEO, Jotham Tai.
Hey, Angela, how's it going? Thanks for joining us on today's show.
Hi, Jotham. Great for having me.
I hope you're ready to nerd out because today the topic is technical accounting.
Always my favorite. Thanks for always bringing the fun, Jotham.
Well, yeah, this podcast is all about fun and accounting, and our job is to spread the joys and the fun of ASC 606 and all the other technical guidance that that we all love in accounting. So I guess just to jump straight in, Angela, I want to hear about like how someone gets into specifically technical accounting. So my guess would be, maybe you started out, and I know you started out at KPMG. Like, were you just like, hey, I'm digging, what was it, like SAB 101, like back at that time, or 97.2, and I want to do more technical. So I'd love to hear your story about how you got into technical and what drew you in.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share it. So like most folks, I, started out at a Big Four accounting firm. And when you're there in the long days and late nights, I think you really are on teams and you're just trying to do the best you can to help out the team. Inevitably, there's something that comes up that's a technical accounting thing. And I think there's I'm going to call it a weird, sick thing about accountants, but I mean it in the most positive way, that we're like drawn to really hard hairball problems. And something about them makes you want to say like, oh, I want to figure this out. And technical accounting, so for like ASC 606 that you brought up, or stock comp, or any like leases, I think they're all places that are a bit ambiguous and you get to apply some judgment. But my favorite thing about technical accounting was that you really got to learn about a business. Because all technical accounting, the reason why it gets so hard is because you're given a framework of all these bullet points that are indicators of maybe you go this way, or maybe you account for as expense, maybe you capitalize, maybe you take some number and string it over time. But all of it is based on what is the economic substance of the arrangement. And the only way to get to economic substance is by talking to lots of people. You get to talk to like the business people, the strategy people, you get to learn about the product. And I think that became really fun to put deep knowledge about a company against accounting literature. And so, while you're spending all of those hours at the firm, it's just something that's fun to really dive into. It also differentiates yourself, but to be totally honest, I wasn't really thinking about that when I got into it. It was really that I think I was at that point in my life, I didn't realize it, but that I was drawn to hard problems. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
I also think that once you get to know a couple of the pieces of literature, they start to get less scary because you start to realize that nobody has the answers. And that actually gives you a lot more safety net, as opposed to thinking that there's one right answer and that you're constantly wrong. There's actually a lot of space for judgment.
Well, I want to summarize like two key points that I took away from that. And it's also helping me kind of recall like my days as I started getting into some technical accounting. I wasn't as hardcore on that. But the 2 points that I took away was, one, it gives you a window to understand like business transactions, and specifically with revenue, right? Like you have to learn what the company is selling to be able to apply the guidance properly. The second is just having knowledge and being able to tackle like really hard problems. I mean, if you can imagine, and I'm imagining, and Angela, when I was at KPMG, I think the first project, no, it wasn't with you, it was with another team. I was at restatement with a company called Micromuse. It was learning 97.2, and like no one really knew how to apply it, including the company. Obviously, they went through a restatement, but for me and the others that trained me on 97.2, like for us to figure it out together, and solving those problems, taking the contracts and applying it, and then like being put in a position where you have this immense and very valuable knowledge at 24 years old. Like, I think that's, yeah, kind of what got me going for, at least for a little bit on the technical accounting side. But is that kind of a good summary? Or would you add anything to that for, those that are interested in maybe pursuing this field?
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. And it's funny because I was thinking before we jumped on this podcast what the first assignment that I was on with you, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but I think it was like a medical insurance company.
It was
And
a reinsurance company.
Yeah, it was a
Reinsurance, like,
company, and they had little squishy baby hearts that were stress toys. That was very awkward, but I remember that very clearly. But I remember making the spreadsheet with you because one, nobody really knew how to take a revenue and string it over time. I think it was a multiple element arrangement, and it had like a percentage completion something. And anyone that's built that spreadsheet realizes that that's cool that you got the accounting answer, then it's super hard to implement. And so we ended up on spreadsheets. But yeah, it absolutely is that you really get to know every single contract, every single nuance. And it's really, yeah, it's just really interesting. I would say that it is a space for the curious, and it's a space for those who don't mind to take the time to read a whole bunch of literature, but you only have to read it once. And then you're considered an expert, strangely.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And you can take that knowledge in so many different ways. I think it opens so many new doors. You mentioned like big spreadsheets. So I think for fun, I want to bring this in and for the audience to hear. True story, audience. Angela and I once partnered on a spreadsheet, and we called it the Big Ass Spreadsheet, aka the BAS. Of course, we don't have to tell anyone which company that's for, but we named something BAS, and it's stuck for like a couple of years, which is pretty fun to think about.
Yeah.
But Angela, so for folks who are maybe in operational accounting, looking to make a transition to technical, like how would you describe? And I know this is probably a loaded question now that I think about it. But what's like a typical day for a technical accountant?
So I think it depends on what kind of company you are. And I think it might be helpful to share a little bit of background about where I was and where I am, and maybe that'll canvas a little bit of this question. I'll loop back to your question at the end of it. So for me, my journey, I started out the accounting firms. I stayed for a weirdly long time compared to a lot of other people. So I stayed for 11 years. And within that trajectory, I was in audit. Then I went to Switzerland, and I did IFRS US GAAP conversions. Then I came back to the States, and I worked in learning development, sat with the national office. So got really deep in tech accounting, then went out into advisory, and then helped companies implement a lot of 606 stuff because that was the time frame. When I left it, I went to Glassdoor for a year and a half. And I would say after spending that much time at the accounting firms in what I would now call the ivory tower, I was totally humbled by how absolutely difficult it was to take something that I thought was very easy, at least on the operational level, and realize how absolutely difficult it was to get into systems and processes, string together a team, move everyone in the right direction, work with your engineers, do the configurations. It was incredibly difficult. And I think the people and operational accounting, like how you get it done every month after month, is incredibly, honestly inspiring. I can't believe it happens because unlike if you're sitting in product that you're saying, oh, we're going to scope that out, the month comes every month. It always ends. I remember thinking like 15 days into the month, I was like, oh gosh, it's almost the end of the month, and then like you're closing for 15 days or But I share that story because I went into operational accounting for a year and a half. And when I left, I started a network of software and SaaS companies. It's called GaapSavvy. And that network of software and SaaS companies was really meant to bridge this space between operational accounting and technical accounting. Because one thing that I realized once I had a taste of it in industry is that there were so few people that, at least in the accounting firms, that could really bridge that space where you knew deeply accounting literature, but you also knew what it really meant to put it in a system. I think if I had those pieces of knowledge when I was a consultant, I would have suggested different policies that were easier to implement, like percentage of complete. You need to buy a whole extra module, for example, or usage-based accounting versus straight line. I'm not saying that the that you'd want to frame your business after accounting, but I'm saying that there are choices that you can handle in policy, there are choices that you can handle in implementation, and there are choices that you can handle in people and policy. And so I share that story because I think that the bridge from an operational accountant to a technical accountant is so important. And I actually don't believe that there are any operational accountants that totally don't understand the technical, or there's any technical accountants that totally don't understand the operational. I think there's a sweet spot in between. I think that there's places to nudge both directions, and both are incredibly important. And that's where you can create real value. I would say if you were an operational accountant and you don't believe you're a technical accountant, I would say just try. And I say that lightly because I believe that you are probably already thinking about it. You already know the nuances of, oh, I heard us talking to the auditor about this way or this way. And to close that gap is really the point of, what I was doing with GaapSavvy, which is to create a space for everybody up and down the layers, from staff accountants all the way to director levels, to be able to share that conversation. Because if you're not getting it in a firm, you're not really part of writing that white paper, but you should at least be part of the conversation. And I think it's just the exposure to and realizing that it's not that scary is how to open the space. And I think it's the way that we all get better together.
Yeah, well, one of the key points there for me was just bridging operational and technical, and how critical like that is, especially in today's environment where, also on the business side, the business models are becoming more and more dynamic. So you can't just have one or the other. You're going to need to know both. And, now that I'm in the seat that I'm in, Angela, like I can appreciate, and we just actually went through a 606 exercise, starting off with a very light one. But, I can now appreciate, even beyond operational accounting and sales orders and invoicing and 606, but also just like the kind of the business impact to some of the policies. And we touched on policies, before, like extended payment terms, opt-outs, why they may be important to use very judiciously. But yeah, I think I come from also a world like many, many years ago where someone who is just purely technical just looked at it purely from a technical lens. And it's hard to imagine that person can add value without being able to articulate not only the operational accounting side, but just the operations and the business transactions itself. So yeah, I'm glad through GaapSavvy, you're really establishing that bridge, because I think that's what makes us accountants valuable to the business.
Yeah. I remember when I was in industry, one of the hardest things to do as an accountant is I feel like I kept saying no to things, like no to a new business line, or no to a new, like maybe we can just try selling it this way or that way. And no accountant actually wants to say no. I think that's something in our, I think we all want to enable the success of the business. And it really sucks to be put in a position where you feel like you're like, oh my gosh, I can't, because I can't stay up from the hours between 11 and 12 every night, which is a totally reasonable pushback. But I also think that understanding that bridge up front, understanding a little bit about the terms that'll trip you up, is super helpful. But I absolutely don't think it should run your business. I think that's why it's just the knowledge of and choosing the policies, but also knowing that your policies can change as you evolve. I know that they're not technically supposed to change, but I also think that there's a nice natural way that as you get new audit partners, or you might go through SEC review, there are just different humans in the system. Like the system is, how do I say, it's very human, in that it's not like there's an accounting rule and so ASC 606, right? Each accounting firm, KPMG's guide is about 1,000 pages. EY's firm is, or book, or EY, like they range from around 250 to like 1,000. How many people are reading that book? Pretty much none, right? Because there's the rest of your job to do. So you can imagine the amount of discrepancy and judgment that actually go into people's policies. It's not amazing, but that's really what happens, which is, again, part of the mission of GaapSavvy is to bring people to consensus at an industry level, as opposed to relying on the humans that are in the accounting firm system. Because the people in the just completely human firm they're being passed along like messages through like trainings, or like who you sat next to when you were a first year, or like what lunch you had, what PCOB review you had. And everyone's doing the best they can. I just think there's something about the fact that like we're all going through this change. We all need to listen to each other, but being able to balance what's on the policy side and implementation side and not trying to get something technically beautiful from a like, conceptual standpoint and really realizing the practical implications. I feel like it's just so important to a company.
Well, and I think that ties back to one of the points that you made earlier. So I think part of the opportunity of being technical is being able to listen and to understand how the business works. And we established that in today's world, that's important to know. So I think it's an opportunity for technical accountants to just like not say no to everything that comes their way, but and this is the fun part, right? You get to go out and talk to engineers and sales and learn more about the business. So I know traditionally, like, yes, that was maybe a sign for I'm going to work Friday night. But I think, now I think it's an opportunity for you to level up your kind of business acumen and your skills. So hopefully I'm not over pitching the technical accounting path, but I really do see that as kind of an important agent, obviously like for financial reporting purposes, but also to help businesses like drive like really good, reasonable policies for growing purposes. And, I could even think about it from, obviously us as a growing company ourselves, we had all these like rigid policies about what not to do. I would rather have a technical accountant advise us on what we can do, what are the different options. And you can't really get that without understanding the business. So preach, Angela, like I'm all I'm all for that. And I'm really glad that, that mantra is being adopted with GaapSavvy, and that love is being shared in that way. So as we're wrapping up here, just kind of want to go through a few logistical things. So, some of our audience maybe are starting from the operational side, not much exposure to the technical. If someone is looking to make that transition, like what are some like practical tips for someone to get started?
Yeah. So one thing that, there are some trainings, and I think they're limited. You kind of have to find the ones, but part of it is just listening to the words. The firms give free trainings. There's lots of different sources. The other thing I would say is when you get that first, it depends on your size, but when you have a consultant that's helping you with your technical accounting, if you're not the person, ask if you could sit in the meetings. See if you can be a part of it. That technical accountant is going to need to understand the bridge of their operational side. So really, I mean, just be in the room. I think you'll be surprised at how much you know. And then I think the other piece is maybe raise your hand to take the first stab at the memo. It's really hard to find time out of your day when you're an operational accountant or when you're in any company trying to close the books. To have the time. But if you take that first stab at maybe putting together the outline, but it's really just starting, I think that will give some confidence. And I think it'll also tell the people around you that you're interested in it, which is actually a huge part too, because I think that something that gets lost is the day-to-day, like we have to get this done. Oh, you know how to do it. Okay, you do it, right? And to be able to break out of it, the only way is to ask. Nothing happens unless you ask.
Well, yeah, I don't know how it is in today's world, but I look back to when I was in the industry and doing consulting. If I had to raise my hand and I said, oh, I attended a FIN 48 training, I mean, I'm going to get voluntold to probably do something.
Nobody wants to do tax, 100%. Nobody wants.
Right. But I think the point of that you raised there, which is like, why not attend some trainings and get yourself caught up? I think opportunities may present themselves, right? So that's a good way for you to get started, to your point. And I love the suggestion too of taking the first stab at the memo. Like your memo doesn't have to be the one that's reviewed by the audit partner, but maybe you can help construct it and get yourself familiar with the guidance, and hopefully you'll have help around you. And I think that's those are two really great points to get started. And Angela, as we wrap up, so first of all, I'd love to continue this discussion, and I think double clicking on some of the specific guidance and hearing more about GaapSavvy, I'd love to have you back if you're up for it. Yeah. But it would not be a technical accounting episode if I didn't ask you, like, what is your favorite technical accounting guidance of all time?
I was worried you're going to ask this question, I'm not going to lie. Uh,
Mine is Fast 52. So yeah, business combinations and FX.
Wow. I can only say the one I've spent the most time in, and it's probably a love-hate relationship. So I guess I'd have to say ASC 606. It seems a little jaded. I wish I had some fun, nuanced one. But I guess
So if I could ask, like, which one did you like better? 606, 0801, or 97.2? Or just classic 101, 104? Gosh, we are totally geeking out now.
I think so they took all of those. I spent more time in 606. I spent more time in the basis of conclusions, which actually talks about how like 0801 and 97.2 and one of how they all got mushed into one, and actually understanding how they got mushed into one in 606 is part of the bridge back into whatever policy you used to have. Depending on the accountant range. So in GaapSavvy, we have some accountants that are newer, some of them are older, and sometimes we'll actually bridge between the like, oh yeah, that was the old 0801 thing that we did to make sure devices and software were the same performance obligation. And it's a little bit of like a little badge of honor to say like, hey, like it kind of in the weirdo accountant world. But I really, I don't know if the word is enjoy 606, but I really like how it tried to bring it all together. At the same time, I hate the way it confused certain topics. So it's a little bit of a love-hate relationship. I wouldn't put it in the category of toxic because I've obviously got a lot of my career out of it. But yeah, that's, I would just say the relationship is what it is. But I guess it's my favorite. And then I also wanted to say, I respond back to your old question. If someone is interested, also like people are welcome to join GaapSavvy because I think that is the bridge. The love-hate relationship, I don't think is going away. Just to share one story about 97.2. 97 represents the year that it went in, right?
Yes.
97 is like a really, really long time ago for a lot of people. And so in 2017 or 16, which is when the new standard was supposed to go, they kept delaying it. But at that time, most of my work when I was at KPMG was still on 97.2, which just means these things are so confusing that 10 years beyond, we will still be talking about the same topics. It's just a little humbling, but it's just to say, if it's your favorite, it's not going away. We're just going to keep reinterpreting it. That's it.
What you called it a badge of honor, but it's also a sign of age or experience level. Right. The fact that I know 97.2, I guess, gives it away that I may be beyond a certain age. But nonetheless, like revenue guidance, and I mean for good reason, is very important to folks like me because it has such a significant impact to financial reporting. So can't go wrong with that answer. And again, Angela, thank you so much for joining us today, and can't wait to have you back.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gaapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.